I found him on the kitchen floor with a note beside his hand, and the first thing I felt wasn't grief. It was the cold understanding that the man I'd married had been lying to me for months. Let me go back, because nothing about that morning makes sense unless you understand who Daniel used to be. When I met him, he was the calmest person in any room. We were both 26, both working too many hours, both pretending we weren't lonely. He had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only thing in the world worth paying attention to. He put his phone face down on the table when I talked. He remembered the names of my coworkers, the plot of the show I was binging, the brand of tea I liked. He wasn't loud or showy. He was steady. And steadiness, when you've spent your whole life around people who run hot and cold, feels like coming home. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. He did it without a crowd, without a Ring camera, without an audience. Just the two of us on a Tuesday night in our tiny apartment, rain coming down outside, and him on one knee in the middle of the laundry I hadn't folded. "I don't want a single ordinary day without you in it," he said. I cried so hard I couldn't answer, and he just held my hands and waited, smiling, patient as ever. That was Daniel. He could wait for anything. He could wait for me. We got married in the spring. Small wedding, backyard, fairy lights strung between 2 oak trees. His vows were about partnership, about how love wasn't a feeling you fell into, but a thing you built brick by brick, choice by choice. Everyone cried. My mother, who had been suspicious of every boyfriend I'd ever brought home, leaned over to me at the reception and said, this one's solid." And I believed her. I believed him. I believed in the whole quiet, dependable architecture of the life we were building. Then I got pregnant, and somewhere in those 9 months, the foundation started to shift in ways I didn't notice until the walls were already cracking. Our daughter was born in the dead of winter. I'll call her Lily because she was small and pale and impossibly delicate, and because the first time I held her I understood that some loves arrive, fully formed, and gut you in an instant. Daniel was there in the delivery room. He cut the cord with shaking hands. He cried, actually cried, the steady man undone, and whispered to her in this low voice I'd never heard him use. For about 6 weeks, we were a family in the way you imagine when you're young and dreaming about the future. Exhausted, yes. Drowning in diapers and 3 a.m. feedings, yes. But together. And then my body did what bodies do. I was breastfeeding, and my hormones flatlined my libido completely. I didn't even realize it was a known thing at first. I just knew that the part of me that used to want him had gone quiet, like a radio between stations. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a punishment. It wasn't even about him. It was biology, plain and clinical. And when I finally read about it, I felt this enormous relief, like, oh, I'm not broken. This is just what happens. But Daniel didn't read about it. Daniel took it personally. The change in him was so gradual that I kept explaining it away. First, it was little comments. We never touch anymore. Is it me? Did I do something? I'd be standing at the sink with cracked nipples and a baby screaming in the other room, running on 2 hours of sleep, and he'd be asking me if I still found him attractive. I try to be patient. I try to explain. I'd say, it's not you, it's hormones, it'll come back. And he'd nod like he understood, and then 3 days later we'd be having the exact same conversation. Then the nodding stopped. The man who used to put his phone face down at dinner started scrolling through it while I talked. The man who could wait for anything became someone who sighed when I asked him to take Lily for an hour. He got jumpy, anxious. He'd pace the apartment at night. He stopped sleeping well, and when he did sleep, he'd toss and mutter. I'd catch him staring at nothing, jaw tight, like he was arguing with someone inside his own head. I remember one night, Lily was maybe 4 months old. I came out of the bathroom, and he was sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands, and I asked him what was wrong, and he looked up at me with this expression I'd never seen on him before. Desperate, hollow, almost angry. I feel like a roommate, he said. I feel like you don't even see me anymore. And I was so tired, so completely emptied out by motherhood, that I just said, Daniel, I can barely see myself anymore, and went to check on the baby. I didn't have anything left to give him. I didn't know that the thing I'd left to give him was the only thing that would have mattered, and even then, I'm not sure it would have been enough. He became someone I didn't recognize. The steadiness curdled into this restless, grasping need. He'd reach for me, and I'd flinch, not because I didn't love him, but because I was so touched out from a baby on my body all day that another hand felt like too much. And every flinch landed on him like a verdict. I could see it. I could see him collecting evidence against himself, against me, against the whole life we'd built. But I was too underwater to throw him a rope. I kept thinking, we just have to get through this phase. We just have to survive Lily's first year. It'll come back. He'll come back. We'll be okay. I had no idea that while I was telling myself we just had to survive, he had already decided to look for what he wasn't getting somewhere else. I want you to understand. I'm not telling you this to make myself the villain or the saint. I'm telling you because for a long time I genuinely believed that if I had just been a better wife, a more giving wife, none of it would have happened. That belief almost destroyed me. It took me a long time to claw my way out of it. What would you have done in this situation? Sit with that for a second, because I've turned it over 10,000 times, and let me know in the comments, because I still don't know if there was a version of me that could have saved us. The week it all came apart started like every other week. Gray. Cold. Lily had an ear infection and hadn't slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch in days. Daniel had been working late, or so he said, and coming home smelling like a different kind of tired. We barely spoke. We'd become two ghosts orbiting a crib. It was a Thursday. I'd taken Lily to the pediatrician in the morning, and we got home around noon. Daniel's car was in the driveway, which surprised me because he was supposed to be at work. I carried Lily inside, calling his name, expecting him to be in the home office or asleep on the couch. The house was too quiet. Even the dogs, we had two, a pair of scruffy rescue, mutts named after old movie stars. Even the dogs were standing in the hallway, frozen, ears flat, staring toward the kitchen. I remember the cold went through me before I understood why. Animals know things before you do. They'd been trying to tell me something was wrong for weeks, the way they kept pressing against him, whining, following him room to room. I just hadn't been listening. I found him on the kitchen floor. There are moments your brain refuses to process in real time. I saw him, folded against the cabinets, one arm flung out, an empty pill bottle on its side, a folded piece of paper under his fingers. And for a full second my mind just blanked it out, refused, said no, that's not what that is. Then Lily made a sound against my chest, and the world snapped back into focus, and I was screaming his name and lowering her into her bouncer with hands that didn't feel like mine, and kneeling next to him and shaking him and calling 911 all at once. He was breathing, barely, shallow but breathing. The dispatcher's voice was calm in my ear, walking me through it, telling me not to move him, telling me help was coming. I read the note while I waited because I could not read it. It was short. It said he was sorry. It said he couldn't live with what he'd done. It said, and these are the words that I still hear at night, I cheated on you, and I can't carry it anymore, and you and Lily are better off without the person I've become. I didn't even cry. That's the thing nobody tells you about shock. I just knelt there on the cold tile, reading a confession of betrayal from my husband while his life leaked away under my hands, and the only thing I felt was a roaring, total numbness, like standing inside a bell that had just been struck. The paramedics came. They were fast and rough and efficient in the way you need people to be in those moments. They got him onto a stretcher. They pumped his stomach at the hospital. They told me, hours later, in a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, that he would live, that he'd make a full recovery, that I'd gotten him there in time. The doctor said, you saved his life like it was good news, and I nodded, and I went home, and I sat on the kitchen floor where I'd found him. They cleaned it up. There was nothing there anymore, and I finally cried, but not for the reason anyone would have guessed. I wasn't crying because he almost died. I was crying because he cheated, and the only way I'd found out was a goodbye note he never meant for me to be able to ask questions about. I didn't go see him for a week. People judged me for that. The nurses, I think, with their careful, neutral faces. His mother, definitely, who called me 11 times in 2 days. But I couldn't do it. I could have made my body walk into that room and look at his face. Every time I imagined it, I imagined him saying sorry, and I imagined myself having to comfort him, the man who had broken our marriage and then tried to leave me alone with the wreckage and a 6-month-old. And I couldn't. I needed the wall. I needed the distance. I needed to not be responsible for one more feeling that wasn't mine. It was my mother who finally got me to go. She came and stayed with us, took over with Lily, made me eat, made me shower. And on the 7th day, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "You don't have to forgive him. You don't even have to stay married to him. But you have to look at him, baby, or you'll spend the rest of your life looking at the version of him on that floor." And she was right. So I went. And here's where the story gets strange, because the man I walked in on in that hospital room was not the man I'd been living with for the past year. He was sitting up in bed when I came in, sunlight from the window, and he was calm. Not the anxious, grasping, hollow-eyed stranger who'd been pacing our apartment for months. He was calm as a cucumber, with this faint, soft smile, like a man who'd set down a weight he'd been carrying for so long he'd forgotten what standing up straight felt like. He looked impossibly like the man I'd married. The steady one. The one who put his phone face down. The one who could wait for anything. "Hi," he said gently. Just that. "Hi." I didn't know what to do with it. I'd braced for a flood. Apologies, excuses, begging, tears. Instead, he was quiet. He apologized, yes. He said he was sorry for cheating and sorry for the note and sorry for what I'd had to see. But the second he sensed I didn't want to talk about it, the second my whole body locked up, he just let it go. Changed the subject. Asked about Lily. Asked if she was sleeping any better. Asked if the dogs were okay. And for the first time in almost a year, a conversation between us felt normal. Felt easy. Felt like before. I left that hospital room more frightened than when I'd walked in, and I couldn't have told you why. He came home with me a few days later. The doctors cleared him with a plan, outpatient care, follow-ups, the whole apparatus that gets built around someone who's tried to end their life. And the eerie calm came home with him. I'd watch him move through the house, and it was like watching someone who'd already made peace with everything. He folded laundry without being asked. He took night shifts with Lily so I could sleep. He didn't reach for me, didn't pressure me, didn't ask if I still found him attractive. He just existed gently in the corners of our life, smiling that soft smile. The dogs couldn't settle. They'd run to him, press their heads into his legs, then come barreling back to me, then back to him, whining, agitated, doing this anxious circuit between us like they were trying to herd two halves of something that wouldn't come together. Animals know. I keep saying that. They knew something I was only beginning to feel in the pit of my stomach. One night it all came out of me. I don't even remember what set it off. Something small, a dish in a wrong place, a comment about Lily's schedule. But suddenly I was unloading a year of fear and grief and rage onto him, standing in the middle of our living room, shaking and shouting, saying things I'd been swallowing for months. And he didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He didn't get that hollow, desperate look. He just stood there and listened, and when I finally ran out of words, he said, quietly, "How are you feeling right now?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "It wasn't my fault." Just, "How are you feeling?" And it broke something open in me. I never lost control like that in my life. I'm a steady one now. I'd thought, I'm the one holding everything together. And here I was, coming apart, and the person catching me was the person who'd shattered everything in the first place. He hugged me. I let him. And in his arms, I felt so small and so seen and so utterly exposed that I couldn't look him in the eye for days afterward. It's a terrible thing to be comforted by the source of your pain. It scrambles every instinct you have. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. We post new stories every day, and trust me, you're going to want to be here for how this one turns out, because I promise you it does not go where you think it's going. Our family started circling. His mother, my mother, a couple of siblings, suddenly everyone had opinions. Divorce, reconciliation, custody, therapy, the future, the future, the future. This word everyone kept saying like it was a thing you could simply pick up and carry forward. I wanted to bury my head in the sand. I wanted to pretend it was all going to be all right. I didn't have the bandwidth to decide the shape of the rest of my life while I was still trying to figure out how to get a colicky baby to sleep. People online, because yes, in my desperation I'd written about it, poured it out to strangers in the middle of the night. People kept warning me. They said the calm wasn't healing. They said sometimes when a person who's suicidal suddenly seems at peace, it's not because they've gotten better. It's because they've decided. They said watch him. Watch if he starts giving things away. Watch if he starts saying goodbye in ways he normally wouldn't. Watch the hugs. One stranger told me, bluntly, don't be surprised if there's a moment soon when you just can't find him. I got defensive. I remember typing back, curt, almost angry, he's fine, because I needed him to be fine. Because I'd already survived finding him on that floor once, and I did not have it in me to brace for a second time. So I told myself the calm was real recovery. I told myself the soft smile was the man I loved coming back to me. I told myself that whatever he'd done, we could maybe, possibly, with enough work, find our way through it. I was wrong about what the calm meant, but not in the way the strangers thought. 2 weeks after I'd poured my heart out to 1,000 anonymous people, Daniel sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where my mother had talked me into going to the hospital, and told me what the calm actually was. It wasn't peace before an ending. It was peace before a beginning. His beginning, without me. I've been thinking a lot, he said, in that gentle, even voice, hands folded, that soft smile flickering. About what I want. About the life I actually want to be living. And I want to date again. I want to fall in love again. I want sex and passion and a partner who wants those things with me. I want to have a family, a real one, the kind I imagined. And I don't think that's going to happen here. Not anymore. I stared at him. I think I actually laughed, this short, ugly sound, because the absurdity of it was almost too much to hold. You cheated on me, I said. You tried to die in our kitchen. I pulled you off the floor. And now what? You're leaving? You're choosing to leave. I'm choosing to live the life I want, he said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. And he meant it. That was the horror of it. He wasn't being cruel. He genuinely believed he was simply, calmly, claiming his own happiness, the way you'd claim a coat from a coat check. The man who almost killed himself out of guilt for betraying me had been reborn into a man who felt no guilt at all. He downloaded a dating app while I sat there. Right in front of me, at the table, thumbs moving across the screen with that same calm efficiency he now did everything with. I watched my husband make a dating profile 6 feet away from where our daughter was sleeping in her bassinet. I didn't even have words. I just got up and walked out of the room. That was the last real conversation we ever had about us. Within a few days, he was going on dates. He didn't hide it. When I asked where he was going, he told me, plainly, no shame, no apology. I'm meeting someone. A woman. I'll call her Vanessa. Younger. Unattached. No baby on her hip. No flattened libido. No year of resentment build up between them like sediment. To her, he was the calm, steady, attentive man. He could be that for her, because he didn't have to be it for me anymore. He'd offloaded all the hard parts of his life onto me and walked into a fresh start clean. About a month later, he moved out. He packed methodically, calmly, that same eerie peace radiating off him as he wrapped dishes in newspaper and labeled boxes. The strangers had been right about one thing. He was giving things away, saying goodbye, being unervingly serene. They just had the wrong ending in mind. He wasn't leaving the world. He was leaving us. He moved in with Vanessa. Our mutual friends, the ones who didn't have a heart to keep it from me, or maybe the ones who did, told me they seemed happy. Affectionate. Cuddly. He looked, they said, like a new man. He looked like a new man because he'd traded in the old life for a newer model. And the old life was me and a baby he'd helped make. Because here's the part that still, to this day, takes the air out of my lungs. He didn't just leave me. He left Lily, our daughter. He told me he wanted to start fresh, that he wanted to live the life he actually wanted, and apparently that life did not include the little girl whose cord he'd cut with shaking hands, whose name he'd whispered in a voice I'd never heard before. He pays child support. He does that much. He sends money on time, like a subscription, and he lives his life with his young girlfriend who dotes on him, and he gets, finally, everything he decided he wanted. A clean slate, a warm bed, a woman with the time and the body and the freedom to give him the things I couldn't give while I was keeping a newborn alive. I'm going to tell you the most humiliating part, because if I'm telling this story at all, I have to tell the truth of it. I would have stayed. I would have worked on it. After everything, the cheating, the note, the floor, I was still open to repairing the marriage. I suggested counseling. I put myself out there, raw and trembling, and offered to do the work, to put on blinders if I had to try and rebuild something from the rubble for our daughter's sake, and honestly for my own, because I still love the man I'd married, even though he'd stopped existing. And do you know what he said when I offered to fight for us? He said he'd rather date other women. That was his answer to my outstretched hand. He chose strangers over the woman who'd pulled him back from death. People online tore into me for that. They said I had no self-respect. They asked if this was what I'd want for my daughter. They said I needed therapy and a backbone, in that order. And the worst part is they weren't wrong, but they didn't understand that you can know something is beneath you and still grieve it. You can know the door is shut and still stand outside it in the cold, missing the house that used to be warm. I told one of them, let me be pathetic. I'm not the perfect woman who bounces back in an instant. Sorry to disappoint you. Because that's what it felt like I was failing some test of how a wronged woman is supposed to perform her healing. Strong, bitter, triumphant. And I was none of those things. I was just sad and tired and holding a baby. Drop a comment below. Do you think they made the right call? Any of them? Him for leaving? Me for being willing to stay? I genuinely don't know anymore. And I've made my peace with not knowing. Here's what I had to learn slowly in the months that followed, mostly through a good therapist and a lot of nights crying on my mother's shoulder after Lily finally went down. He was never good to me. Not really. He was good to me on conditions. The steadiness, the attentiveness, the patience, all of it was available only as long as I was meeting his needs. The moment life got hard, the moment my body and my exhaustion meant I couldn't be his everything, the whole structure collapsed because it had never been love in the way I'd understood love. It had been a transaction with very good customer service. And when the transaction stopped paying out, he closed the account and opened a new one across town. The man I married didn't come back in that hospital room. I'd had it backwards. The calm I saw wasn't him returning to who he'd been. It was him finally giving himself permission to stop pretending. The desperate, anxious, grasping man of that final year, that was the cost of him trying, however badly, to stay. The serene man who walked away from his wife and infant daughter without a backward glance. That was who he decided to become when staying got too expensive. The peace I'd mistaken for healing was just the peace of a man who'd already left in his heart and was waiting for his body to catch up. I blamed myself for so long. Because I couldn't have as much sex as he wanted. He cheated. That was the story I told myself. The one that made it my fault. The one that gave me the illusion of control. Because if it was my fault, then maybe I could have done something different. But that's not how it works. He didn't cheat because of my libido. He cheated because he wanted to, and he left because he wanted to, and he abandoned our daughter because he wanted a life without the inconvenient parts. Plenty of people lose their sex drive while keeping a tiny human alive. Their partners don't all go find someone else and then try to die over the guilt and then leave anyway. That sequence of choices was his. Every link in it. Not mine. We're divorced now. The papers went through. He has his young girlfriend and his fresh start and his clean slate. And I have a daughter who lights up like a sunrise when I walk into the room, and a mother who shows up every single time without being asked, and two scruffy dogs who finally settled down once the eerie calm moved out of the house. The dogs sleep at the foot of Lily's crib now. They stopped running their anxious circuit the day he left. I think they've been trying to hold two things together that were never going to stay together, and once it was just us, they could rest. So could I eventually? I won't pretend it's easy. I'm a single mother now, and there's no version of that which isn't hard. I have no time for myself. I'm tired in a way that lives in my bones. Some nights, I scroll past photos of him looking happy and relaxed, his arm around a woman who got the calm, steady version of him that I had to lose, and the unfairness of it sits on my chest like a stone. He got to walk away into the life he wanted. I had to stay and build a life out of what he left behind. That asymmetry will never feel fair, and I've stopped waiting for it to. But I'll tell you what I know now that I didn't know on that kitchen floor. A man who is good to you only when you're useful to him was never good to you at all. A peace that arrives the moment someone decides to leave isn't healing. It's the quiet of a door clicking shut. And the partner who bails the second things get genuinely hard is not someone you could build a life on, no matter how steady they seemed when the building was easy. He'll do it again. With Vanessa, the first time her body or her circumstances or her own exhaustion stops giving him what he wants. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. My daughter is going to grow up watching me. That's the thought that finally got me off the floor for good. Not the night he left, but every night after. She's going to learn what love looks like by watching how I let myself be treated and how I treat myself. And I refuse to teach her that love is something you earn by being convenient, or that a person who leaves when you're at your lowest deserves to be chased. I'd rather be a tired, single mother who knows her own worth than a comfortable wife who put on blinders to keep a man who'd already decided I was optional. He's living his best life, and I used to think that was the cruelest part of the whole story, that he got rewarded for the worst thing he ever did. But I don't think that anymore. He didn't win. He just left before the bill came due, and that bill always comes due. People who discard the people who love them don't get to outrun that forever. One day Lily is going to be old enough to ask why her father chose a stranger over her, and there's no calm, soft smile in the world that answers that question. He's going to have to live inside that silence for the rest of his life. I get to live inside her laughter. If you're sitting there judging the woman in this story for being willing to stay, for offering counseling, for wanting to put on blinders, please be gentle. Betrayal doesn't make you weak for hoping. Loving someone who's hurting you isn't a character flaw. It's just love that hasn't finished grieving yet. The strength doesn't come from never falling apart. It comes from what you rebuild after. And I rebuilt. Slowly, on no sleep, with a baby on my hip and a heart full of holes. I rebuilt. The holes are still there, but the house is mine now, and it's warm, and nobody in it is pretending to be someone they're not. I saved his life that day on the kitchen floor. I'll never regret it. Not because he deserved it, but because of who I am. I'm the kind of person who pulls someone off the floor, even when they've broken her heart. And I'd rather be that than the kind of person who calmly walks out on the people who need her most. He got to keep his life. I got to keep my self-respect. In the end, looking back at all of it, I know which one of us actually got the better deal. Hey, we're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers on this channel, and your support is the only reason we are anywhere close. If you're not subscribed, please tap that button. Thanks for making this dream come true.